Yo, 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 everyone! Lego tubers, Lego Masters fans alike. Welcome to the newest episode of Lego Masters Live, the Aftershow. This week, we're taking a look at episode 5. Now, just in time for last week, I had some appointments. We were all very busy. We couldn't go live. We thought we'd miss an episode and have to do a double one. But in fact, Lego Masters episode 5 didn't premiere last week. It actually premiered today. So they skipped a week, and it's, I guess, just our luck, in fact, that it kind of worked out that way. So we haven't missed a beat, basically. So yeah, I know, and everyone definitely missed having their weekly episode, but I feel like it gave us at least some buffer time, and now we're back up and running. Haven't seen you guys in over a week or 2 weeks or so. So it's exciting to have you here. Thrawn, All Out Brick, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
So we will be taking a look at episode 5.
Thanks for having us, Zach.
Yes. We'll be taking a look at episode 5. Now, this episode is, again, something new that they really haven't done on Lego Masters before, where now, instead of using the tables that they all know and love as Lego builders, they're having to build their creation suspended in air, starting with one small, just long little Technic piece, which is this Technic brick, which is actually pretty interesting. Like, Will Arnett brought up the fact that, you know, look at the size of these creations, you know, who went all out, who went big, and the fact that this brick on these 2 strings is going to be able to support so much weight over time is pretty remarkable. So I will say, like, looking at it from that perspective, this episode was a new kind of like challenge that I don't think we've ever seen before. And definitely when it comes to, I don't know, Thrawn, would you know, like, is this a challenge you see elsewhere in the Lego community before, or not really?
I've never seen a challenge like this. I've seen, like, you know, builds suspended, but never like, hey, here's a piece that is already suspended, build around it and show us what you can do. So it's definitely new and interesting, but builds off of pre-existing stuff that the community has done before.
Right, totally. I mean, they brought that up. I think Mark brought that up. He was like, you know, you've seen these like floating islands in like on Lego message boards and Lego sites, like on like the whole Lego community. Like, it's been actually a thing. Most recently, he was saying that people are starting to do and contribute to, and like it's becoming popular, which is why they did, I think, really well in this challenge. But I guess besides that, oh, I have a phone call. One sec. That was weird. Besides that, honestly, I think we're just ready to probably just get into the episode as is. My first thoughts are, yeah, like, this is a challenge we haven't really seen before, and it was really exciting to watch. Overall, Thrawn, what did you think just before we get into it?
I loved it. I thought it was very clever, and it created some really interesting and challenging Lego design issues that they had to deal with, which I think is what made it such a unique concept. And also the fact that, like, you know, you have no support, so you're testing as you build instead of testing ahead of time.
Right.
So it was really fun. I really enjoyed watching it.
All Out Brick?
Yeah, I had a lot of fun watching this one as well. I thought this concept, it was interesting on the note that, like, obviously starting from that one hanging brick, it's like infinite possibilities. I was interested to see if anybody would outweigh the suspension, and it's like a studio, so
Right.
it was very unlikely. But when specifically with one of the builds, which when we further detail it, it's so big that I was like, I wonder what the weight capacity is on these suspenders.
Right.
But it was a lot of fun, and we got to see a ton of different variety of builds. I'm surprised nobody name-dropped Avatar. That's the first thing I thought of when I heard floating, especially with the islands. But overall, a fun episode.
No, totally. And it's interesting, too, because, yeah, it's definitely a thing that you saw, at least with 2 of these guys. The 2 of the teams were very similar in certain ways, but they all stood out. And there was, like, you know, for the most part, every team definitely tried something different and tried to not be like the others. So it was great to see. I guess just to start off, we'll take a look at, see here, what's the first one that I have up? Window capture. Oh, it's right here. This is the palace in the sky, right? This is the sibling team where they brought up the fact that, like, growing up in California, they like to view the sunsets, and they wanted to kind of put this fluffy cloud, which another team tried to do a cloud, but this one was, like, really well done. I remember, like, Amy was like, wow, it looks great. Yeah, so I was a pretty big fan of this one. Color wise, it's not the biggest, but like color wise, it works. There's a lot that's standing out. I guess one of the cons they said was that the two human or like the two characters that are like the painters basically don't have as much detail as they might have been able to put in if they'd had a little more time. But overall, Lauren and Brian, I think, did a good job with what they had. They told a bit of a unique story. And the sun underneath, the cloud on top, the kind of like circular shape, we didn't really see in any of the other builds. So it definitely stood out. And it makes sense that they were able to go through on this challenge and not get disqualified. I guess I'll outbreak if you want to go first, and then Thrawn.
Yeah, sure. So just looking at this picture right now, I'm surprised I didn't pick up on it watching the episode, but that's a pretty good techniques that they must have used to get that arch to stay suspended like that.
Right.
And that's impressive because, like Thrawn mentioned earlier, there's really no support. You kind of just have the one brick, and then you have to build off of that. But I agree with what you said about the characters. I think they could have been further detailed. We saw some other other teams in this competition, just in this competition, in this challenge that made better figures at a smaller scale, in my opinion. So I agree with the judges' critique there. This kind of just felt middle of the road to me. Wasn't too high, wasn't too low. Kind of forgettable, but it was still turned out pretty nice.
Right.
Yeah, I thought it was good. The building for the cloud was really impressive. The figures themselves, I could see that they were a little plain, they were a little flat. The castle itself wasn't super impressive. It was mostly just clear bricks and some colors. My main complaint, I think, with this challenge is if I see you build clouds or floating islands, it feels generic. I want you to build off of that as much as possible because it's it feels like such a safe bet to do clouds or floating islands because that's something we've seen floating all the time in like fantasy and stuff.
Right.
So the fact that they chose cloud, I don't think they embraced or worked on the cloud concept enough for it to be as impressive as it should be.
Totally.
That's just my thoughts on it though.
Yeah, I think the cloud, a lot of people were going to do just I think naturally a lot of people, their mind goes to clouds and there goes to like floating skies and all of that. So it makes sense that a lot of people are going to like default to that. And so I hear you there, Thrawn, 100%. You want to like see something more. It doesn't look like a floating island, at least. It is a just fluffy cloud. I guess I'd say, the most impressive part is kind of like you said, all out brick, like just pointing out the fact that they were able to do this arc, this like curvature on the side. Really hard to do, and from far away it definitely catches your eye. That was a big thing the brick masters were saying, is like we want something from far away to catch our eye, but then the catch is that when we get closer we want to make sure that it looks even better and it's even more detailed.
I like to give them some credit for they chose to do like that sunset below the cloud. I think naturally everyone would have just done like that arch above the cloud, and it probably would have been easier, more stable.
Right.
But I think that artistic touch, that was like a pretty good inclusion there. Different. I know that they're like painting the sky, so it's cool to see them like they're above it, creating it. But
yeah. All right. Cool. So the next one we have is Jack and the Beanstalk by Dave and Richard. One of my favorite teams. I'm so glad that they have continued on. They've stayed in this competition. So story-wise, I really liked what they had to do. It's that classic Jack and the Beanstalk story, but instead, the giant at the top is willing to give his wealth and help the people underneath. And the story's there. I liked the little animation. A couple of these that they were able to do stop motion animation for were great. It goes to show you that they put a lot of thought into the story. I do think they had a couple problems. The cloud itself, especially having looked at the previous one, which was a giant cloud, it's not as fluffy. It doesn't look as attractive of a cloud. The cloud actually kind of disappears in that middle bit of the beanstalk. That probably was needed, though, for support. But the details itself going down, I think they could have put something at the bottom, like other humans. Like I think like in the animation, you see that there's like humans on the bottom. I think they could have built a kind of a base at the bottom, but they're obviously pressed for time. Kind of middle of the ground for me as far as a lot of the creations goes, but still, like, I think that storytelling, the creativity was there, but definitely in like the bottom tier, the ones we saw this week. How about you, Thrawn?
So for me, I think in terms of story, I think it was the worst one.
Really?
The reason I think it was the worst one is because like using a fairy tale like Jack and the Beanstalk feels like such an easy way out to me of like not having to put your own interpretation or your own concepts in it. Like the concept that they worked on was like, oh, the big giant is giving coins to the other people. I'm like, but that you didn't do much with that, right? Like you just took the fairy tale's basic concept and then just changed it. The build would stay exactly the same whether you did or did not include the giant giving coins to people.
Right.
So that would be my main complaint. Also, it is very plain-ish for the Cloud and Beanstalk. They did have the issue of the Beanstalk falling, which kind of sucks. Ball joints can only take so much, force until they eventually disconnect. The builds for the Goose and the characters was excellent. It was very well designed on how they did the builds. It's just the rest of it, I think, was not as good. But compared to some of the others, that's what made them in a safe zone for this challenge.
Right, totally. How about you, Brick?
I think the point that you brought up, Zach, is a really interesting one, that they could have put a base and some of those people that we saw in the animation there. And I almost wonder if they were planning on that. But once they had that first crash, they were like, okay, we don't want to mess with this. Like once they had it up, I wonder if they were like, we could do the base, but is it going to be too much weight and then it's going to crash again?
Yeah.
Because that was interesting that they included that stuff in the animation and in like their initial storyboard sketch, but we didn't see it in the final build. I do agree that this Cloud compared to Lauren and Brian's, definitely a little bit of a tier below. You mentioned how the Cloud gets separated by the Beanstalk. I wonder if they could have added some white encapsulating the Beanstalk to really show like the Beanstalk is going through the Cloud.
Yeah, exactly.
And not like it's breaking it up.
That's what I was saying. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, overall, yeah, middle tier. Makes sense that they got through it. But yeah, Brick, anything else to say before we move on to the next one?
No, I'm excited to see what these guys do. I think they have like a pretty high ceiling when it comes to their builds. I think more often than not we get them in like the middle of the road, but I think sooner or later we might see them really pump something great out.
Cool. All right. Well, let's move on to the next one. Up next, we have Susan and Jen. Now, these are the mom duo that I think has kind of like, as far as surprises goes, surprised me the most to like have been able to keep making it on and on throughout these challenges. They were having a lot of trouble in those first two, but then managed to really pull it together. Now, I know they got a couple of points docked on just the fact that it wasn't big, and I think the full 360 story wasn't all the way there because on the back you didn't see as much going on. But I like the story of just like this woman who's tying balloons to a tree, and the tree itself gets lifted up onto the ground. It's like this isn't a fairy tale like Jack and the Beanstalk that we heard before. This is like their own original idea. So I think that kind of original story, along with still the details within the build, while it's not as viewable from the back, from the front and the sides, you can kind of see that this is an interesting story going on. And honestly, I think generally it's very like detailed with the tree. The tree itself looks good, and I just think the only reason they weren't in like the top two, obviously, is just the details weren't as maximized in size. And I think they were trying to see people really go above and beyond and stretch the limits of what these like things could, like as far as just being up floating, in air. But I was worried, that they were going to be in the bottom two. But as we'll see, there were some other builds after this that definitely saved Susan and Jen a lot on this. What did you think, Thrawn?
I definitely think they should have been in the bottom two, solely because, as the judges pointed out, it is very one-faced. Right. There is a camera-friendly side, and the rest of it not so much. In terms of concepts, I think they did a really good job on the concept of like floating tree is more interesting than floating cloud or floating rock. So that I think is cooler. And their own, interpretation or spin of like a story was a good idea. It's better to put in the originality than like thinking of something that already exists and then just trying to modify it for your own needs. Trees built pretty well, although I wish there was a little bit more branching out. The roots, I feel, are a little mediocre. They could have done like some brick built roots coming down from the bottom. But again, they were trying to work on their time management, which ended up, I think, being more of a hindrance than a benefit for them.
Right.
but it was clear, right? The benefit that they had, which I think made them not hit the second, like, bottom two, was the fact that it was very straightforward and clear. Of you knew exactly what was going on as soon as you looked at the details. Where the build that ended up being in the bottom two did not have that, but their building I thought was better.
Right.
So you know,
Yeah.
maybe tied. Maybe they should have tied
Yeah.
for second. But
Three,
you know,
three in the bottom.
three in the bottom, two of them just tied for it.
All right, Christian.
Yeah, I agree with Thrawn. I thought the build like that I thought were going to be the bottom two. This was one of them. Just because I think the tree is just so plain. Like they definitely could have had more branching out, especially from the backside. It's really just like a flat reddish brown, and yeah, they have like a good curvature on it. I just think like especially with the scaling with those roots, like obviously those roots would be way thicker for a tree of that size. So I think that kind of gets lost a little bit. I do like the color that they included with the balloons. They kind of made like almost like an up type of scenario there, where the balloons are lifting the house up. I like their concept though for their story. You know, they were personally inspired for it, and they didn't just rely on like a fairy tale like the Jack and the Beanstalk. They, you know, they figured out how to put this mostly together. They were just so focused on that one side, which is a shame because the judges specifically said, you know, this needs to be 360. And I think they were trying to level this build out while the judges were walking around. Like I remember a couple cutaway shots of them and I was like, I mean, you do realize it's just gonna go back. Like it's
Right.
so I think they kind of realized that they had one side that was much better than the others, and I think they're lucky to have just escaped out of this round.
Right. All right. So next we have the turtle, the like flying turtle by Maria and Phillip. This was one. Here we go. Yeah, Maria and Phillip. This is the flying turtle. This was one that I think actually was a little bit underrated. I actually really liked this design. I liked what was going on underneath it, as well as the little tower above him. I don't know. I thought like they didn't talk enough about this design, and personally, I agree with one of the teams that won at the end. But I feel like I would have liked to see these guys up there in the top two, just because again, it's not exactly a floating island. It's a floating turtle that kind of like allows there more to be just, it's not just a rock formation. You know, it's an actual well-built, really cool looking turtle. And it has this tower, this lighthouse, which is like just an interesting story. It's an interesting concept. And I think visually it was just a little bit more appealing to me at least than like, who are the guys? Mark and Steven, I think they were the other guys in the top two. That's just me personally, though. I understand why they also won in there. But, you know, I will say, I think, yeah, this one, I personally really liked it, and I think they could have gone further. And I think, you know, in my opinion, I probably would have put these guys in the top two. How about you, Christian? All Out Brick.
I really like this one too. I think the turtle is a really good idea because I almost imagine they were thinking like, hey, floating islands, and then they morphed it into a turtle. And I just think the progression they made with it was really good. With the lighthouse on top, they kind of kept it themed with the ocean. The thing that I didn't like about this build was the underside of the turtle.
Okay.
It almost looks like it's his guts spilling out. That's kind of how I see it. And the judges said the coral could have used some better work too.
Yeah, I guess.
I just don't see coral when I see it. I think it's like so centered in his stomach that they could have used it, or maybe like thrown in some like bright blue colors or just some bright yellows, something to switch it up. It just kind of looks uh like either like his guts or like an alien type of thing where it comes out the stomach. And so I feel like that could have been improved a little bit,
Yeah.
but they were a very, very solid build and very unique, good choice to use the turtle, I think.
I hear you there. Thrawn, how about you?
Yeah, I kind of agree with the coral. I do think that maybe some more different colors other than red and orange would have benefited the coral. Definitely underrated build, very cool concept. You know, the Turtle Island, which is like a Native American folklore kind of ideal. He's used in like other fantasy areas and stuff like that. Very common thing, but like no one else did it, right? Which which makes them stand out compared to like two floating islands, two clouds. So that made it pretty cool. The lighthouse itself, I think, is a really good build. The turtle's head and fins and the main body of the turtle, I wasn't super impressed with. but just the fact that they made it come together and didn't seem to have any structural issues was pretty impressive. The fact that it was, full 360 was really great. You could see the dude on the back on like a dock doing some fishing. I think that's, the details that they put in were really good. But they were definitely beat out by, things that were either bigger or prettier, which sucks. So
Right. Yeah, I agree. Exactly. Pretty much, I think we're all pretty much in agreement here. Totally.
Yeah.
It's funny. Bios Carl says it looks like baby xenomorph bursting out of the turtle, which I can see it now. Now
Yeah,
that I see it,
man.
they want to do the red
Yeah.
coral. They want to do the red coral, but I can see that. Okay. All right. Up next, we have Michelle and Natalie. These are the two girls, best friends. They, I think, did a great job. They were they in the bottom two? Yeah, they were in the bottom two. And I guess the whole reason why, it's funny because when Brickmaster Amy is explaining why she likes it, she's saying, oh, it's because from far away and even a bit up close, you couldn't even tell if it's Lego. It's why they won the last competition with their hat.
Yep.
But I guess with this competition, as much as they did succeed in the size and definitely the length of the build, there wasn't as much of a story, and you couldn't really tell what was going on because it was so focused on trying to look like a real hanging plant. If it were up to me, I wouldn't have put them in the bottom two. I would have probably put the mom duo just because I think, this still has that 360 element, and it's still just like the impressiveness, I think, of the build and the realistic look of this plant. Gives it points in my book, but it's up to the Brickmasters, Amy and Jamie. So at the end of the day, they decided to put him in the bottom two, but I can see why. I guess it's a little bit lackluster in story and character, and it's kind of hiding the figures that were inside of it. But otherwise, I actually still really thought it was a pretty good build, and I think they definitely got a lot more criticism than they deserved. How about you, Thrawn?
Yeah, I think they definitely got. I think the main issue was that the build itself, when you look at the build, just the build, it's a really good build. It looks like a potted plant from far away. It doesn't look like Lego. But the story is what ended up killing them, and the mixture of trying to do realism and a story at the same time, I think is very clashing, which kind of hurt them, right? Because like the realism of it being a plant, right? There's a lot of leaves, there's vines, it's very planty, it's very cluttered because plants are cluttered, but you're trying to tell a story at the same time and you don't have the space for it. So I definitely don't think they should have been in the bottom two, or again, like tied with the mom duo. I think this is better because the build is better, but the mom's story was better and theirs was much worse in my opinion.
Totally. All right, all out Brick.
Yeah, I think this one, I definitely don't think it should have been in the bottom two. I agree on that point. It definitely didn't deserve that. I think there were other builds that were worse than this one. Specifically that treehouse. I definitely would have put the treehouse below this one. They definitely get lost in the story. And I think they're the really high ceiling where if they can figure out how to tell some stories and get that point across, their artistic eye and their ability to make Lego look like something completely different is definitely top notch out of the teams in this competition. We saw it with the previous challenge, and we see a little bit here too, that if they can really just hone in on telling a good story and what elements make that story really stand out, then I think they're going to be a dangerous team. But we kind of are getting to that point where good teams are going to start getting eliminated, so they don't have a whole lot of time to figure that out.
Yeah, totally. I think that kind of sums it all up there. I agree with everything. Let's see if we can get to the next one. Who do we have next? After Michelle, Natalie. Oh, cool. Yeah, we have Mark and Steven. So these are the guys that won. It's kind of like, I guess like they kind of deserved it because they hadn't had a big win yet, and they've had a couple of rocky moments because they are really, really good builders. Like even in the Lego community, they're very well known. And, it's... the only, I guess, like docking I would give it is that it is similar to the twins. They had a floating, I guess you could say, a floating island as well. But they definitely did it a little better here. I think the color with the branches coming out, it's really hard to do that and have everything stay. I think Brickmaster Jamie was saying like the fact that they were able to have these things coming out and like they all stayed very still and nothing really fell or broke. It's definitely a hard task. I don't really have much else to say because while I really thought this was an amazing build, maybe it's just personal preference. I thought like the turtle was a little cooler. I thought this and that, but that's just me, obviously. Let's turn it to you guys. Thrawn, what do you think about this one? That the guys that won, Mark and Steven.
I really liked it. It definitely played to their strengths because they've probably done the floating island challenges that AFLs do. And they worked with the fantasy theme, which they are both really huge fantasy builders and are amazing at it. So they basically just played to their strengths. The thing that you could tell was not their strengths was the story behind it, right? It's very easy to say, oh, it's fantasy. You already know about it, right? Like, oh, orcs and elves and stuff. You already got it covered. For them, their struggle was trying to figure out how can they take the fantasy element and make it playful in the Lego way, right? And the butterflies really added to that concept, just story-wise. In terms of build, it's a beautiful build. They knew exactly what they were doing. They killed it. It applied to the things that they're already really good at. I don't think they've yet to have they been at the bottom two before
Yes.
at all. They have. Which build
in
was
the
it? I don't remember.
tower challenge, the
Right,
earthquake.
the tower challenge. Yeah, because it wasn't structurally sound or something. Yeah. Yeah, they haven't been in the bottom often though, and I think that shows they got the mechanics and the systems down. It's their storytelling that is the thing that is being put to the real test, and I think other people's storytelling is much better than theirs, which is where they're going to struggle. But I'm interested to see where they go.
Yeah, so I agree. This was my favorite build of this challenge. I think they deserve to win. I think what they really nailed with this challenge was creating that scale that from far away, you're intrigued and you want to go look at it. And then when you get closer, you see all the little things. I think they really, really nailed that technique. And then just the sophistication behind getting those different parts to balance out perfectly and making it full 360 degrees. That's really, really impressive. And I think it's like a subtle kind of like brag of their building style. Like they can, like if they want to do something this like incredibly impressive, they can. Obviously, they're big fans of the fantasy theme, so any chance they get, it seems like they kind of gravitate towards that. We saw I think Pirates fits in kind of close to that, so they did that too. I do think they're going to be really strong going forwards. The only time we saw them kind of have a hiccup was when they did something that I don't want to say was completely out of their control, but like that earthquake machine, like there's a lot of variables that go into that, like we discussed in that episode. So the fact that they haven't had a hiccup in terms of falling apart on a build or time management, I think really goes to show that they're going to be super strong. And now they got the golden brick, so I think they're a safe bet for like the finale, in my opinion.
Right. Totally. I think, yeah, they're a safe bet. I think at the end of the day, those sort of decisions of like when they were in the bottom two with the tower build are just, due to the fact that it's just the challenge itself is very difficult. Now they've really starting to get their stride. And I do think, yes, they're a very formidable team, and like going forward, are one to like really pay attention to and take seriously, because now they've had a taste of the success. They also have the golden brick, right? So they're going to be in this like for the long haul, I think, because no matter what happens next episode, they're probably going to move on to the next. So we'll see what happens. All right, next up we have Randall and Sarita. Now, as a team, I've really been a big fan. Actually, I was on their side, in their court in the first half of this season, but then the last episode with the hat that they tried to do wasn't very attractive or that appealing. I think the episode before that, their tower was cool, but didn't really get across their point of like this hip hop kind of like tower. And I understand like that they really want to mix and incorporate that bit of their personality and who they are. But when you look at this build, this, air balloon, I mean, for me, from far away, it looks like just a planet, almost not even an air balloon. And like the details of the actual riders in the little carriage is so just like not appealing, very lackluster, very boring. And just, when I was looking at this, I was like, hey, what if they put netting, like Lego netting around it to make it look a little more like an actual air balloon, or to like put a cool bigger flame, or really emphasize the carriage, maybe make it bigger with some more humans. I was just surprised about like all they really focused on was making this big globe, and then didn't really focus much on showing or telling what the story was. It's just kind of colors. You got yellow, red, green. So again, unfortunately, understandably, they were in the bottom two, and they were the ones that got eliminated this week. I hope the best for them, because I think they learned a lot, and like they have a Lego business, you know, where they kind of incorporate their like hip hop passion and everything. But yeah, Thrawn, I don't know. Obviously, it's like we have to do this. What are you gonna say about this one?
Yeah, this build sucks, bro. For being real. And I don't think it has anything to do with them being bad builders. It's more, I think, that they're probably not used to these kind of scales, which is why, you know, when the builds are more small and more detail oriented, I think they killed it. They did very well. They knew exactly what they were doing. They know where to put the details. But as soon as it gets to large scale things, you start to notice that it's mostly big colors and primitive shapes. And that's because I don't think they're used to this size, which sucks, right? Because like if you're not used to building big, you're not going to be able to build big all of a sudden. Like that takes practice, and you can't just do it. So I think we saw it with their large tower, we saw it with their hat, and this is the one that broke the camel's back of like, you got the shape kind of, but there's nothing else there. You forgot, you know, the details and all that, because they were so focused on just trying to build the shape. A better team would have been able to do this probably faster, probably have gotten the math correct, probably no alignment issues, more detailed, more interest, you know, maybe made the balloon a little bit more colorful and stuff like that. So, but they learned a lot, and I'm sure they're going to take all that information they've learned and apply it directly into their business. Great resume builder, and I'm sure they'll do well.
Yeah, I agree. Christian?
Yeah, this build was worse than the Rahaga sets. No, I'm just kidding. But this was pretty clearly the worst one that we saw in the challenge. I think Thrawn, you absolutely nailed it. They are good at the smaller stuff, but once the size gets up, it's always these big colors. Like we always see these big chunks of color, not a lot of detail. They get overwhelmed by scale, and the straw finally broke the camel's back. I mean, this was it. Especially I think when you zoom in on like the bottom portion of that hot air balloon, it's just like two minifigs or people sitting in there. There's just really, really plain. There's nothing. I don't know where they really started to get off track here, but I mean, conceptually, I just don't know how they thought it was going to end up being something that they could carry through. I do think they learned a lot in this competition. I think they learned a lot of skills that are going to serve them well. Whether or not they decide to bring large scale models to their business, I don't know. Not exactly their forte.
Yeah.
But I do think that they have some great personalities. They were a lot of fun to have on the show. Unfortunately, just these last couple challenges, they've slipped down a little bit, but did have fun watching them. Sad to see them go.
They lasted a long time. They lasted a long time,
did.
So that's great for them. You know, they made it halfway through the show. That's pretty awesome. Okay, Caleb and Jacob are next. Now, they did the floating phylos, which, again, like I said, similar to Mark and Steven, you know, floating island. But I don't know, again, personal preference. I actually like this more than Mark and Steven's. I guess, you know, maybe it's not as visually appealing, but I think the waterfalls and the fact that it went so low, like it's probably one of the tallest ones we had here as far as like from ceiling to floor, like making it stay as structurally sound with those waterfalls coming down from like level to level. You know, it's not one big island, it's like multiple little ones. So I actually thought this build was pretty great. But again, Marcus Steven, I think some of their coloring and just a bit more of the technique they used on the design and making it look almost not Lego here and there just was a kind of the nail in the coffin for Caleb and Jacob not being in the top two. But overall, I really liked this design. I thought it was very cool, extremely well detailed, and structurally sound, which was important. Christian, all up brick. What do you have to say?
Yeah, I think this one, the only thing that hurt it was that Mark and Steven did islands too. Yeah. If Mark and Steven didn't do islands, I think we're looking at a top two build right here. I really like the color, like that you pointed out, all the blues, the oranges, and like there's a lot of color going on here. Caleb and Jacob, I think I would say, are my favorite storytellers that we have on this challenge. I think every single time they come out with a really good story, and like you see that face carved into the mountain. Like there's so much to like that they do story wise that you're gonna have fun when you look at their builds. I think their technique might be a little lacking, but to get those other islands to stand up just by being connected by the waterfalls, I mean, that's pretty impressive because those are really thin waterfalls. I guess we'll just have to see how far they can go. I know they're pretty young builders for this competition, so hopefully their lack of maybe like more advanced experience doesn't hinder them. Because
Yeah,
I would like to see them go far,
I
but
agree.
we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah. Thrawn?
Yeah, I agree that if the other team didn't do floating islands, they probably would have won. Honestly, it is really good floating islands. The fact that there's more than one island was really cool, especially how they use the waterfall system connected with the Technic pins and the bricks in there inside was really clever. I was a little upset that you could kind of see it. Like if you kind of like zoomed in, you could notice that the Technic was like obviously showing. The way they did the rock, I think, was really weird because they built it upside down. I
Yeah,
want to say,
yeah, they
which
did.
I didn't see anyone else doing that. So I thought that was a very clever use of what you had because it was, I feel it'd be easier to build the rock face the other like, top to bottom and then just invert it than it
Yeah.
would be the other way around, right? You know what I mean?
Do you think structurally that impacted anything? Like flipping it upside down?
I don't think it would have
so,
affected the structure that much. I think it made the rounding of the structure itself more interesting. But then again,
Yeah.
the other team that did Mark and his brother, the team that did the other floating islands, they ended up it being a little easier for them because their island was smaller and thus they had a lot of Technic connections, which made it easier to put that like weird undulation for their rock, where they mostly did the like standard, oh, it's big at the top and smaller at the bottom.
Yeah.
In terms of like
yeah.
the concept, I think it's okay. It is really clever and interesting. It's just the build itself. It's farmland. It's fantasy farmland. It's not that crazy or unique. It's not gnomes and butterflies. You know what I mean? Like it's not bad. It's just
Alright.
you can tell which one's
Yep.
gonna win, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I totally hear you there. It's exciting to see how them and Zach and Steve or Mark and Steven go on kind of next to each other. It'd be great. Wow, I think Caleb is literally watching right now. Cheesy Studio says, "Thank you guys for all the kind words. The big reason for building it upside down was because there were more slopes available in that orientation." Right, and I loved the way the waterfalls fell down through it. Thanks for watching, Caleb. Oh my god, that's awesome.
Yeah, what's up, man?
Welcome, man.
You guys did well.
Yeah, you guys have been doing
Sorry.
good.
Sorry for the roast.
It is what it is.
Now I'm being called out. Oh no.
That's great. That's great. Thanks for watching, Cheesy Studios. Caleb, yeah, thanks for watching. That's awesome. Yeah. Like I said, I was in your guys' corner. I loved that build. I loved the waterfalls. The structure itself was like very hard to pull off. So great job, guys. I'm looking forward to seeing how you guys do on the next one.
Yeah.
All right, sweet. Now let's take a look at, last but not least, Zach and Wayne. Of course, they did the squid and the whale. Wow. I mean, this kind of blew everyone out of the water. I think even Will Arnett was like, how is this staying afloat still? Like the length that they went, it's not necessarily the height. A lot with the other one is like it was about the height. The length that they went to, the sheer size. I mean, I think it was Jamie or Amy, both of them were like, within the 10 hours you had, we haven't even seen a build this big on a table, let alone floating in air. So the 360 element is there. This is like an art piece you would want to walk around and see every single angle of, the red of the squid standing out. You have the gray whale kind of with like the details as well. I think like Amy mentioned like the eyeball and just the kind of scales on the side. I was just like, again, I kind of think they should have maybe taken this because the originality, is there. And I don't know. I think they're an incredible team. And just looking at the sheer size of this build and all the rules that were here, which is tell a story, have it be, view from all 360 degrees. Like, I just think this encapsulated the challenge so enormously well and was very much an out of the box thinking. I mean, it's hard to do a Lego whale or a Lego octopus or squid already. But to do it in this size and at this scale, you know, floating in air, I don't know. I could just keep going on forever about how much I was blown away by this and how much, in my opinion, I think they probably should have gotten first place. But they've already been given first place before. They've had the gold brick before. They wanted to give it to Mark and Steven to change it up, probably is what I'm thinking. But I don't know. Let's take it to you, Thrawn. Overall, just looking at this.
So, big dick energy when he started putting his whole weight on that main. Oh my god, I was like, that is ballsy to just do that. Structurally, it's a beautiful build, right?
Right.
There's beauty in its simplicity of it is a whale and a squid, and you can easily tell from huge distance away exactly what those two things are. I think the reason they ended up not winning, like, yeah, it's stunning that it's so big, right? It's not highly detailed. It's detailed for its size and scale, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. But compared to the builds that kind of toned it back a little bit, their storytelling was more strong because of the scale. Right? Because like here, it is a squid, it is a whale. There's nothing past that. Where with, for example, the team that won, you can have small vignettes of action, like, oh, a gnome talking to the butterfly, you know, that kind of stuff. Or as well with the twins, right? They were showing the insects fighting the farmer. You can show the small moments. And here it is one big moment, so it's putting all your eggs in one basket. So good on them for getting in the top two, and they absolutely deserve to be in the top two just for their scale. It's just past size and past the simplicity. I don't think they were able to win this, even if the other team with the gnomes didn't get it, and then, you know, the other floating island would have taken over, I think.
Right, totally. Christian?
Yeah, so I think, Thrawn, you kind of touched on it. The scale itself is, you know, you see it, it's like, okay, they're in the top two. I mean, you can't not reward that type of scale. They definitely built the biggest. I didn't think they were going to finish what they had planned out. Like, it's just all of the plates and everything, and they did have a little bit, it's a little off center in terms of like it being level, but that's not a big deal. Getting that squid to stay in place and wrapping all the tentacles around, that's impressive, especially when you just look at they had 10 hours to do this. I do think I wish I saw some more detail. You do point out a good point, Thrawn, that it's a squid and it's a whale. There's nothing beyond that, and it definitely, I don't want to say suffered, but I think that's the difference between the first and second place. The first place had so much stuff to look at, and while this certainly looks good from 360 degrees, very straightforward. There's not a whole lot going on beyond what you see it from far away.
Right. Totally. I think that actually definitely encapsulates the reason for why they were second place. Now that I think about it, yeah, I guess it's almost too simple, I guess, in the story that they're trying to tell. And when you have, you know, another team like Mark and Steven that have been working super hard, haven't made it into the top two yet, you know, very deservedly so. They got the golden brick, as we've seen. So,
I imagine they were so angry when they almost got that golden brick back and they were that close. Like, man, if they got it back, that would have been the ultimate flex.
Yeah, I mean,
like they lost, they got it back.
Redemption for Mark and Steven. So, yeah, all right. As far as this episode goes, it was a really cool one. I think that this is something they should try again maybe next season, because it really puts these builders who have been doing this kind of their whole life into a new corner of a challenge that no one really expected to see. And I wouldn't be surprised if future Lego AFOLs and like conventions start to incorporate. Obviously, you have to make it safe. Have to make it safe and sturdy. You know, they're up in here in the valley in North Hollywood. They have like a stage they can actually use that's made to support this kind of weight. But it would be cool to see this kind of competition, this challenge done in the future. But overall, I really liked the episode, and I'm looking forward to the next one. As we saw, it's like a demolition derby. They're going to, I think, be given a photo of a car and then just recreate it from memory, which will be actually really interesting to see who can pull it off. I feel bad because I feel like the team that loses next week, no matter what, is going to be a team I like, because I pretty much like all the teams that are here now. I think all of them deserve praise for all the work that they've done. So whoever loses is just going to be sad because either their just build is going to fail or they're going to explode and fall and crash and burn. So we'll see. I'm excited though. How about you guys?
I'm really excited too. I think I'm interested to see how like the actual like results of the demolition derby play into the like the overall results. I imagine it's going to be mostly judged on what you build, and then the demolition derby is just for the fun of it. Like maybe the team who wins it will be automatically safe or something like that. Hopefully we get some really cool builds, a little bit of Mad Max inspiration in there maybe. Can't wait to see the Lamborghini featured, that life size one. That's incredible.
All right.
So I'm really looking forward to it.
Thrawn, anything less to say?
Yeah. I didn't watch it again because every time when the episode's over, I immediately stop watching to not spoil myself on what's gonna happen next, so I can go in there raw.
Not anymore.
But yeah, from what you guys have said, it sounds interesting. I'll be excited to see how this plays in. Whether this will be another one of those interesting concepts of like what part of the challenge is going to be the important part, right? Of like, is the derby the important part, or is the realism the important part, or like is the memory the important part? Where does the story come in for that? You know, that kind of stuff. I think it'd be really cool to see just how that plays out and like who's gonna come on top and who's not.
All right. Well, thanks for being here, everyone. Thanks, Cheesy Studios. Caleb from this show itself was here. That's awesome that we have someone from the Lego Masters watching our show. It's great to see you here. Thanks for watching, Caleb. Thanks for watching, everyone. BioScrawl. I believe we had a couple of other people here. Nidiki Pictures, Odd Dude 21, DJ Alistair, Erethan Alfuro. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. We had 8 consecutive viewers at once, but it seems like we got 40 to 50 people at one point tuning in. So thanks for watching again. We'll see you guys next week on the next episode of Lego Masters Lives. But until then, I'll see you next time. And what is it that you say, Olibrick? Keep bricking or whatever?
Stay bricking. Stay bricking.
Stay bricking.
We're gonna trademark that, so no one's taking that.